I'm Brianna Amaya, and this is part 1 of Not Born to Hate. The series provides a platform for dialogue regarding experiences of racism in America and how we are called to honor the dignity of every individual we encounter because they are made in the image of God. Today we will be talking to university students from different walks of life and learn about their experience of race, racism, and culture in America. Today's discussion will be moderated by Bridget Richardson, Assistant Director of Ecumenical and Pastoral Initiatives at the Nesty Center for Faith and Culture at the University of St. Thomas, Houston, and Darnell Miller, Catholic Outreach Manager at the University of St. Thomas, Houston.
All right, and now we're going to jump into our Q&A portion, our questions for these students. And we want to start you off really high level, all right? So the first question that we have for you is, in your experience, what does it mean to be an American, especially through the lens of faith?
I guess I can start. So in terms of my faith, and in faith in general, it talks a lot about being open and being understanding of different cultures and different people around you, that we're all walking a different, path of life. And my faith helps me embrace diversity and change and differences, and it helps make me kind of appreciate the human condition.
I would also agree with what she said. I believe faith also helps one to be able to unite with other people that may not be like you. And I feel that as an American, it's important to value other people's beliefs and customs and be able to understand them and not judge them for them.
I can go next. Yeah, I agree with that. But as I guess an American, and in my faith, we're taught to not discriminate whether they're from a different religion or anything like that.
I kind of have been thinking about this question a lot about American, and also I'm a Roman Catholic. I think something that has been so helpful as an American is to understand my citizenship as formed by my faith. And in that way, I can kind of sort through all of the, rhetoric of what an American's supposed to be.
I like the framing of that question of what an American is supposed to be. And in y'all's experience or in y'all's mind, what are the traits of an American? What qualities do Americans have, and who do you see that in as your example?
I mean, I kind of laugh a little bit because are we talking about the definition of an American on paper or what we see now, or what society, kind of shows us who an American is? I mean, in my point of view, on paper, as they frame it, the melting pot and everything, we're all supposed to be open and accepting, and help each other and all that stuff. But I mean, when we bring that ultimately to, reality, it doesn't really translate that well. The majority of Americans, I guess I would say, really like to emphasize the freedom aspect, the fact that they are capable to do most things. And I think is the opportunity that the country grants Americans, I guess you would say, is what kind of really helps promote that idea of freedom.
Where I grew up, it's mostly like a Mexican population, like Hispanic population. And so I grew up being an American, I guess, is a privilege, I guess you could say. And how this is a land of opportunities. You need to be proud of being an American.
I think Emily brings up a really good point that I think a lot of Americans are blessed in, what we're born with. If I had tried to characterize an American, I think an American is someone who most Americans are individualistic. They like to pave their own path. And then also at the same time, they're people who embrace change. We learn from each other much faster than I think other countries do because we have such a diverse population.
So from my perspective as a third generation Italian, I come from a family of immigrants, kind of like Emily, and kind of echoing her idea of like immigrant families, especially even 3 generations removed, still have that idea of America as the land of opportunity. It's a place where you can go away from your homeland, whether it was to avoid to get out of poverty, to get out of dangerous situations. For my family, it was that way.
All right. So now that we've talked about kind of the idealized aspect of America, or what you see America as, I mean, it kind of runs the gamut, right? Like I do think that there is that sense of individualism that is very American that Sal talked about. But I also think of, like Amna said, the openness to encounter and culture is another thing that I see, and they kind of sit at odds with each other, right? They're kind of paradoxical in the way that they exist, and that's a challenge, right? It's a really tough challenge, and we've seen that very prevalently this summer, right? We saw with the deaths of George Floyd, with Vanessa Guillen, with others, and the nationwide protest they sparked, right? But in y'all's experience, in viewing this summer and seeing the murders and seeing the protests, how have these events changed how you view and understand the dignity of people and the dignity of those who you encounter?
I don't think it's really changed my view. It's always been happening. It's always been out there. Scale now, to be honest. And I think it's really important that now there's really a big eye on it, and that's the only way change is going to happen, is if we do protest and we do bring things to attention to others, because not everyone has the same experience as everyone else in this country. So I think it's important for these things to happen so people can kind of see, okay, this is what life looks like from someone else's point of view, from someone else's life, because a lot of the things that are happening can be prevented. It's just people have to step out against what's wrong and actually understand why things like this are happening. I
hope the change that is the protests and everything that are happening is awakening people. For me, the background that I come from, I see, like, I hate to say, but I see things differently. I didn't grow up in this country. I grew up in Ghana. So that the way that I grew up and the way that I grew up also here is kind of like 2 separate aspects of the world. And we're seeing that, like, I see the struggles that people go through. I see the ways that we can help, and I see the unity that we need. But that kind of goes against the individualism of this country that Amna kind of brought up. I really love that aspect, because Americans are very, very individualistic. They don't really retaliate or kind of protest or defend each other unless it affects them.
I knew a lot of, like, I guess, like what was happened with, like, George Floyd and, like, Breonna Taylor, like stuff, like, I knew that stuff happened, but, like, as soon as, like, people were bringing it more to, like, light and, like, the media about, like, the amount of people, like, it has happened to, that just, like, their situations were not as, like, broadcasted as, like, the George Floyd, like, that's when I guess I became more aware of it.
Okay, after hearing some of the responses to this question, I kind of want to backtrack what I said earlier with Americans being individualistic and embracing change. I think I should have put some more detail to that sentence. I think recently America has been wanting to embrace change. And I think that's just from the fact that more immigrants are living in America for longer periods of time. So those people are growing up. And now that they're at an adult age where they feel the right to speak and to conversate amongst people, now we're embracing change. But that is so true. From the very beginning of this conversation, there has been these problems, these systemic, like, nationwide problems for a long, long time. I'm sure centuries. But now today, like, our people of today's generation is the one that's speaking up on it. And that's what I mean by America embraces change. It's the new America, not the America that's always been in our history that we learn about.
think for me, this summer was definitely kind of confirmed some of my like worst suspicions about America. Like, if basically, I really just realized that America has a film of just sedation. I feel like we constantly sedate ourselves to the actual problems that lie beneath the surface. There's like a film of just either like consumerism or whatever it may be for anybody. It's just, at least for me, I mean, I'm not guilty of it to come sometimes just be in my own little world and worry about my own things and be individualistic. This country isn't built on principles that are strong enough to support community.
America is ostensibly a Christian nation, right? That's what we say we are. That's kind of how we've framed ourselves. We believe that every individual is made in the image of God, and that because of that they have inherent dignity. How has some of these realizations kind of shifted that? Like, do you think America does that? And how do we fail as a country if we don't?
I think this is a hard question to answer. Maybe that's why we're all so silent. I think on a personal level, I guess for me at least, these things are kind of out of my control, in the sense that I'm not in any position of authority. I'm not in any job that actually can help, create organizations to help people advocate, people get the awareness that they need. But I think more than just like, are Americans doing what they need to do? I think it's more of a systemic issue. It's more of an issue of like our policies, our infrastructure, the American government, the American system that we have cultivated, that allows for these things to happen. I think it's more of a matter of policy than it is a matter of people, because people are being strong, and they're advocating, and they're saying what is like true justice. It's a matter of like enacting these laws and policies that have been here for so many years and centuries that is hard to get rid of.
I like the fact that Anna brought it up. It is systemic. Sometimes the change seems kind of out of reach from each of us. But to me personally, I think it's both sides. It's the people and then the system itself. But in order for the system to change, I think we as a people need to change ourselves as well. As J. Cole said, 100% comes from the inside. Shout out to J. Cole.
I want to add to that really quickly. I like what Kwame said about how it starts with the people, and then eventually with enough people, you can change the system. I think we call that a term in psychology. It's called cultural lag. And that's the same thing I think Kwame is like trying to say, is that change starts with us right now. And if we can make these small little interactions, these small little changes in our own communities by ourselves, little by little, then when enough people do these changes, then the government will change and fix their system according to what the people are doing.
I think it is super important that like we recognize that like the system is a product of individuals. Like the system is a product of individuals historically and presently that have that has become like you were saying, like the sum total of where we're at right now. We live in a society that's built by individuals. And so it's like the sins of the individual have manifested themselves, like you were saying, like incarnated themselves in poverty, like made actual in society.
What does our faith tell us about how we encounter this, and have our leaders in those faith traditions been vocal about this?
So I was actually thinking about this while we were discussing right now in our conversation. But I think faith is all about knowledge. We seek to learn more about God, but more about ourselves, more about each other. And so I think that's what faith's contribution should be in terms of eradicating the injustices of the world. I know, at least in our theology classes, we talk about how the human heart has a desire to fulfill to understand the unknown, right? It's that understand, like we always seek knowledge. We're always so curious. That's like what's so cool and beautiful about the human creation, is that we have this desire to learn and this desire to seek knowledge.
I agree, but I also believe that in our faith, we also need to work on accountability as far as our faith communities, our churches. I think sometimes from like a church aspect, people become complacent when things happen and they don't really want to push the narrative too much because of backlash or of tradition or whatever the case may be.
Because I know it's not necessarily that people support all the discrimination that's going on. It's just that they don't care enough, but they just don't say anything. I don't know if they think their voice don't matter or if they think they can make an impact. But most people tend to kind of remain silent just because it's not based in their community or people of the same background. So they just kind of let it slide.
I like what you said about like, just because it's not happening in my community, then I'm going to stay silent. Like, I feel like as Catholics, that's not what we're supposed to do. Or like, and I know like my priest back home, he's also Black and he's a priest. We're all like predominantly Mexican church. Like, we're all Hispanic there. And so like we all know what it feels like to be like discriminated because of our race or whatever. And so like he's always taught us like, why does it matter what they look like? Like, why does it matter like who it is? Like, if you love them and like you care about them, then you should like be fighting for whatever they're fighting for too.
I think if I could I'm interested to get perspectives and curious about this myself. So just to use myself for an example, I haven't done any kind of like quote unquote like social media activism, and I kept on hearing around that time that like silence is compliance, right? And in my mind, maybe I'm just overly cynical, but for me, I made a deliberate choice not to say anything, and it wasn't out of fear. And I mean, this isn't some kind of, I'm not trying to justify myself, but not out of fear, but some kind of desire to actually like do something. Like, for example, my major is criminology, right? So I hope to one day work in the criminal justice system, and informed by my Catholic beliefs and my morality. I hope to root out injustice where I see it. And I'm well aware of the injustices, specifically against African Americans and Hispanics within the criminal justice system. And for me, it felt, it almost felt like, oh, silence is compliance, but my intention isn't, like, my intention 2, 5, 3, 4 years from now is to, act, to do something, to root it out. And I think, I don't know, I'm just interested to hear people's perspectives on this, specifically.
I mean, I like the points of, knowing who you are and how you also want to make an impact and the ways that you want to go about it. But I feel like in some terms, as you say, in the future, 3-4 years, how many casualties are going to lay along the way of us waiting for, us to get to, that certain point in life where we actually can make an impact, or where we actually have job positions, or, I don't know, local positions positions where we can make an impact in our society, in the way of you getting to that position where you actually can make an impact. I still think there's little steps that we can take, or little aspects of our life that we can change or improve on or impact on, that will help. Like I was saying, small change is big change. So like, no matter how small it is, it can help impact. Even if it's just one life, it's still a major impact. So that's what I think.
Okay. So now I kind of want to shift the conversation into education, right? Education is one of the root causes of kind of everything that we're going through in the country, whether that be lack of education for some, lack of access to education for others. What were the expectations surrounding education in your life?
I can go ahead and start. I know for me, like my mom didn't finish college. She only went through some college. And so when like growing up, she's always been like, I guess not hard on us, or she didn't mean to be, but like she always had high expectations out of me and my brother. And so like I can remember one time he came home really excited because he got a 98 on one of his quizzes. And he was like, look, Mom, I got a 98. And she was like, okay, but why isn't it 100? And so like, that's just kind of like how we were raised to like succeed. And like, I get where she's coming from, because like she wanted us to have these like really good grades to succeed and be able to go to college and like get scholarships and things like that. But I feel like I know I grew up like in like not like the richest neighborhood, like kind of like towards like the poorer neighborhoods. I feel like my mom's goal was always trying to like get us out of there, like get us like away from all of that, and like to succeed and be able to like provide for ourselves and like give ourselves, I guess, more than what she could, like what my dad could, I guess.
For me, education was definitely a big deal in my family. My parents, one of their sayings was, your job is to go to school. So they definitely did not play about going to school, making good grades. I was expected to bring home A's, like no less than a B. I was the type of kid who would probably cry if I got a B. But it just was from that mentality from my parents and also my grandparents that you have to work twice as hard just to get to this level of some others. And well, they mean others. I mean, to them, I think it was trying to set me up to always persevere and also always have a great work ethic, because I mean, the reality is that there is things that can hinder me just because of the color of my skin or because I'm a woman.
Well, I grew up in Ghana, and back home, the wealthiest people are the people that are set off, kind of like the generational wealth. Back home is kind of based on having farms or having land. And our family doesn't own any farms. We don't own any land. We don't own any businesses or anything that really goes on. Everything that my parents and my family has now has been from going to school or striving hard and working, in the technical industry or doing what they can to earn. There wasn't much besides education, It's either you go to school and you use that education to become a better person, and then use that in turn to better your family and then your community. And even then, back in Ghana, that was hard, because you could reach the highest level that you can and you still can't find a job, right? Which is part of the reason why my family moved here. So
yeah, I think for me, like education in my family was best summed up by like that quote from Good Will Hunting, where it's like, what you got from your fancy Harvard classes and you paid $250,000 for, I paid $1.50 in library late fees. Like, that was always kind of like, I was homeschooled for my entire life, until college. And so I was always taught that, education's the best thing. Like, because knowledge is how we become better people, and it's how we learn to even do the things that we do.
I guess for my family, both of my parents are from Pakistan, and Pakistan has a lot of poor people in a lot of poverty over there, and that's a lot of other countries in the world. It's not just Pakistan. That's the country I've experienced, and for them, education it was just their way of living out of their generational poverty. You know, they're all of their generations, their parents, their grandparents, you know, great grandparents, they all lived in this awful generational poverty. And America was that first time where they got to live a different life, and it was completely different. Education is something that we all need, but it's also, in a way, it's a privilege. It's nice to have, because the more you get educated, the more you understand, and the more opportunities that you have.
And in that discussion of education, a lot of you touched on how important your family's perspective was and how it shaped how you see education, how you were formed in your different educational pursuits. And I wonder, how has your family or your faith community influenced how you perceive your race and the races of others around you in different communities?
So I personally love this question. So my family hasn't really shaped the way I look at ethnicities, because, you know, everyone in my family is the same ethnicity. There's not much diversity there. But my faith community has definitely shaped the way I look at ethnicities and diversity. Muslims have to go to Hajj like at least once in their life. Part of our religion is that everywhere in the world, if you're a Muslim, no matter what your ethnicity is or your job or your background or anything, you all have to come together at that one place in the world, that one spot, and stand right next to each other, shoulder to shoulder, praying to the same God. And I think that's what's so beautiful about it, is that we're not allowed to separate anyone based on any other injustice. Literally, you just stand next to each other as another human being. That's it. That's the only criteria you can look upon each other. And it's like millions and millions of people gathering at this one spot. So in terms of diversity, I think back to that. I think back to, you know, God didn't want us to separate people whenever we pray together. It's supposed to be a communal effort. It's supposed to be a bonding experience. Like why go to church or why go to the masjid? It's because it's a communal bonding. Like, you literally, once you stand in prayer together, you're more likely to get to know the person next to you. And if you get to know the person next to you, you're more likely to help them out with whatever issues they have.
So when I was little, before like even going to school, I would go to like a day school, and it was like a Methodist day school. And so we were like, they always took us to like chapel, I guess. And so we've always been taught like, you guys are all made in the image of God or whatever, like nobody's different, we're all the same on the inside, whatever. So that's just how I have always seen it.
I was taught the balance of collectivism and individualism, like we've been talking about, was like, kind of like Emily said, like we're, you know, taught our identities or skin colors don't affect our dignity. These kind of quote unquote like accidents, to use philosophical language, like these acts, color of our skin, etc., like our culture, are super important too. For example, going to like a quinceañera or something like that, like this is what you do at a quinceañera. This is what you know, like there are certain cultural traditions that that I was always taught to be aware of.
I would say my faith community, especially my church home, one thing I always appreciated in more recent years is that every year we would have a multicultural mass. And at that mass, we would, everyone was encouraged to basically kind of rep where you're from, because even though I went to a predominantly Black Catholic church, there's a lot of diversity, my voice, within that church. So we have people from the Caribbean, people from Africa, you have Black people that are Creole. And then also in recent years, we've also have a Spanish mass. And so at that one mass, though, we would have everybody at that one mass, and then different parts would be said in different languages. And afterwards, it's like a big celebration of the different cultures. And I feel like that also helped me to value different cultures, and even within our own kind of subset. So even though yes, you can be Black, but there is diversity within that subgroup. So I think from a faith aspect, that has my faith community has helped me to see that there's a lot of diversity within being Catholic, within being a Christian, and that we also should value each other's different ways of worship and traditions that go along with it.
I think I liked the point that Asha made of there being diversity in the Black community itself. I feel like there's diversity in our own cultures that people actually don't realize. From my own country, we speak over like 20 different languages. The main is 9, but then there's like a bunch of different dialects from that same language and a bunch of different cultures. And in that small country that we have, there's a bunch of like different clothing, different lifestyles, the food that we eat, how we eat that food. And people don't really realize that. And that aspect helped me here in kind of accommodating for the different cultures that I experience here. So it was kind of a revelation to me when I moved to this country, and then stepping into middle school and high school, I was kind of every other day I was kind of reminded that I was Black or like I was different. And I never thought of it much then, but then when I got to college, I was like, man, they really kind of shun you out like that, huh? It was like every day you have to change the way they change the way I was, I guess. I have to change my own culture to kind of blend in with everybody here.
I like how all of you are touching on all these experiences of unity that you have found in either childhood or through your faith communities or through your families, because I think it definitely calls into how you all mentioned individualism and how in America, with that individual mindset, some of that communitarian activity maybe is lacking in our culture in the United States specifically. And so I wonder, how do you, when you've experienced or witnessed discrimination, seen someone else discriminated against, or you yourself have been discriminated against, how has that brought you to both a greater sense of empathy and solidarity with others who are around you?
So in high school, I used to take this class. It's called independent study. And it was basically like every student in that class had their own research project. And you had like just that hour in every day to work on it. But you were kind of had your own free time in a way. That's what I kind of thought of it as. Anyway, so my 2 other friends were also in that class, and we all 3 had our own different projects, but mostly we would just talk during the hour. And we would go outside to the hallway and just sit there and work on our project. But honestly, we were just playing around and laughing and making jokes and having fun. And I remember that these 2 Black students came out in the hallway, and they were actually doing work. They had like paper and pen, and I don't know what they were doing, but they're doing work. And this AP came up to our hallway, and he told those 2 students to go back to class and that they were skipping. And in reality, they weren't skipping. They were actually they were told by the teacher to go do work outside. But instead, me and my friends, we were having fun. But since me and my friends were all Asians, the AP didn't accuse us of skipping class. And so I felt like that was so unfair. I felt like that was awful just because of the ethnicity that they had. It made me feel really, really bad for them personally. Like I would not have been wanted to been accused immediately like that. At least look at the paper. I had a test in front of me or an assignment in front of me. So I think it made me more aware, and I feel bad. I feel bad that people have to even go through that.
Thing with me, the thing that I guess other people don't realize is how much minorities have to change their life just to not necessarily fit in, but kind of go along their daily lives or kind of be okay in being in society, That's why these past, since March has been really, it's been good, even though it's been really bad. I personally think it's been really insightful and it's been really good for public because they get to see the kind of lives that we get to live. They get to see how much more of our lives that we have to hide. They get to see that a black man can't just, go on a jog in his own community because somebody's going to think he's a burglar because a burglary happened in his own community. Like, why is it even a thing, And those aspects of our lives that we have to change that people don't realize. I think that's the part that it kind of stands out to me the most. Yeah.
I can agree with what Kwame said about like having to like change like the way that I say things, or like, I don't know, like being in a group of like my Hispanic friends and everybody's talking in Spanish, but then like if one like person who doesn't speak Spanish like comes in the conversation, then like all of a sudden like we all have to like shift to like English so that one person can understand. And and the way that I say things, like I've been told that like I pronounce things weird, but like back home, like that's how everybody pronounces it. I don't know. And I've also been told like, yeah, you sound like you're not from here. And it's like, what does that even mean? Like to me, like back home it's normal, but then like I guess like coming like in Houston, like where there is more diversity, I guess, like how Kwame said, it's kind of like normalized to like change to fit in.
So even in that, I know that part of the conversation is a little bit more heavy in terms of like thinking about how others view you and how you yourself have to make sure that you both blend in and are also still you, who you are created to be in God's image, and how to kind of tie it all together and give us all a sense of hope. How do you personally try to cultivate hope, knowing that these issues of racism continue to exist?
I think for me, it's like kind of what like Asha was saying, like accountability, like for like ourselves. Like I feel like if somebody like makes a comment that like is like not like acceptable, like kind of like calling them out on it. So like hopefully they don't make those kind of comments again.
I think what's giving me a lot of hope is my current being a student at a HBCU. That experience has for me been almost life-changing in a sense, because it's totally different from I grew up in schools that were predominantly white. So the transition from that to going to a school where everyone looks like me and has similar goals as me has been really refreshing. And it also kind of motivates me to, want to speak out more, want to be involved in with everything that's going on and just to stay educated.
I kind of relate with Asha. I think it's interesting. So going to St. Thomas, I definitely see myself as a minority in the sense that like I have a different faith background, I have a different ethnicity, that there aren't that many at St. Thomas. But I see it's growing. I think it's growing, definitely. But it's interesting to me because in high school, I actually had a lot of people who were of the same faiths as me. And I had a lot of people who were also just like me, Pakistani American, right? But in high school, I felt less confident with myself, even though there were more people like me, like I guess in the superficial sense that color-wise and identity-wise, right? They were more like me generally. But college, I was one of the minority, quote unquote, but I felt more confident and I felt like I was more a part of a community. And so I think that gives me hope. But
like Asha was saying, like I love the point that you bring up, the aspect of how going to an HBCU have changed, not necessarily changed your perspective, but has improved on how you understand how things function, how the world functions. Mine is kind of the reverse. I grew up around people of the same color as me and people who had the same culture. So I didn't have to worry about a lot of things growing up, as in worrying about, who I'm going to run into when I walk into the hallways, or what kind of people I'm going to sit with when I go to class, or, all these other unnecessary stuff. I just went to school, saw my friends, we walked home, took the car sometimes, we ate, played, rinse and repeat. That was about it. And then moving here, then I realized like, wow, I actually don't know who to sit with for lunch. I feel very uncomfortable here. And it's like the sense of uncomfortability that she brought up And that was literally my whole entire experience of high school. I felt uncomfortable in most places that I was in. So to me, the hope that I've kind of gained over my past experiences is that, things don't stay, I can't speak English. Things aren't always inclined to stay the same. And we're much more inclined to be the sources of change. If I want people to not experience the same things that I went through.
I think for me, one of the big hopes that I'm seeing right now is that the fact that people are willing to have these conversations slowly, more and more. Universities especially, we kind of have this almost duty to be the first people that talk about this kind of thing, that talk about issues that actually matter, because nobody in the world, by the time it gets to out there in the world, it's like people have been so afraid to talk about these things that it's it just kind of explodes. And so it's we need to be having these conversations. We need to not let it all just well up and explode at one time, especially as a university, especially as students. And that's one of my great hopes.
So I want to take the opportunity to kind of wrap it up right here. First, I want to thank you all for participating and for your openness and sharing your experiences and kind of what's in your heart with this. I know it can be challenging and it's difficult and uncomfortable, but I think it is completely necessary, like Sal said. I feel like we just scratched the surface of this, right? We've been talking for the recording of this has taken 2 hours. And we've been talking about this, but I still feel like we barely scratched the surface. There's so much more to go, but I think this is a great starting point, right? I think this teaches us that, as Sal said, we need to remove that film, right? That surrounds us, and that film is kind of being sedentary. That is that complacency that allows us to overlook injustice, and then the next step is to see each other and to acknowledge each other and to be with each other and to learn from each other. And I think this is a great example of how we can do that as a community. And I hope this is something that we can take and help more people do, right? Sit down with one another and just have honest conversations. And I like that where you guys ended all this on this sense of hope, right? We understand that this is challenging and this is hard, and that living in America is a paradox, right? We are hyper individuals, but we're also one of the most generous countries in the world, all things considered. How do we find that middle ground? And what you guys were saying about experiencing hope, I think is something we need to continue to cultivate as individuals and as a community, so that we might continue this change and this growth, so that we might actually actualize living the idea of the Imago Dei, of seeing each other made in the image and likeness of God.